So, welcome to the network automation module. This module will be in English, but you anytime can ask question in German. That's no problem. So, this is a small module, only 2 ECTS points. Should be kind of hands-on. Today we will go kickoff, kind of overview, what we will cover. We have many tools we will cover, not all in the same detail. The goal is to give you the knowledge and the tools to, in the future, if you have any network automation projects, to know which tool could be good for this job, which one maybe not. In the end, one of the challenges we have in network automation is we have so many different tools and approaches. We have to find out which one is the best for us, which one suits in this project. So the goal is to give you an overview. We will not go extremely deep in all these topics because we don't have the time. Each lecture is only 45 minutes, so we can only cover some basics. It also requires you to make some research in your time after the lecture, and the exercises will also be here to deepen some knowledge. If you have any questions, always just ask. So we have 14 lectures. We will start today with some really basic YAML and Jinja. These are technologies we use in most of the tools. We will then next week see 3 tools we have for automation: Ansible, Salt, and SaltStack. That's a typo. That should be Ansible, SaltStack, and StackStorm. Sorry for that. Then we will go deeper into Ansible, because Ansible is one of the tools who is really used in network automation and also infrastructure automation. It's not my favorite tool. We will also realize that in my lecture, but it's important to know Ansible, especially because everyone starts talking about Ansible, and then we have to know what is the difference between Ansible, between Nonir, for example, and so we can discuss if it's the right tool or not. We then will also cover Nonir. We will have a lab where you have to implement something in Ansible and in Nonir. The goal will be that you have the overview of both tools, see the difference, which task is maybe easier in Ansible, which task is easier to do in Nonir. Then we will go deeper in the Python libraries like Napalm, NetMiko, Scraply. Then there is no lecture in week 13. Nonir plugins, where we go a little bit deeper in the ecosystem of Nonir, how we can use the plugins, how we can write plugins. We will then talk about screenscaping, meaning how can we get from a CLI output structured data so that we can work with them in our automation. We will talk about single source of truth. Is there a single source of truth? Do we have multiple single source of truth? One day we will cover testing. Testing is an important topic. Also here only 45 minutes, so we cannot go too deep into the details. CI/CD pipelines, where we can use pipelines also for automation purposes. We will then also have a lab about CI/CD. We have then model-driven automation, where we use Yang, go deeper into the Yang, how we can use this schemas defined to talk with network devices. We will use REST APIs, of course, streaming telemetry, and in week 23 we will have a big picture wrap up. You can also ask for specific topics, we can go deeper there. So this is the module, how it is planned at the moment. If you have any inputs, for example, we can also go in another direction. We can go somewhere deeper if someone has specific interest in something. But this is how it is planned at the moment. There are many tools. Maybe if you heard Terraform, it's not here. Terraform, I think it's in the module Cloud Ops covered. We just have not the time to go in all the nice tools. So it's already a lot for 2 ECTS. So yeah, we have to focus mainly also on the concept that we can then adapt this knowledge for other tools and yeah, find our way in this big jungle. Yeah, I guess most of you know me already. I was in the Institute for Network and Security for almost 10 years. I'm now external teacher. Yeah, nothing so interesting. If you want to make a bachelor thesis in an interesting area, I'm the man. Now, of course, all the bachelor theses are interesting, hopefully. If you are interested in network automation, infrastructure as code, we definitely can find the topic. The facts about the module, as I mentioned, it's only 2 ECTS points or credits. We have 14 lectures, we have 14 labs, each 45 minutes. We will have 2 projects graded 50%, and then we have a short, easy exam, 50% written. Will be 1 hour exam. Yeah. Location, you found it, that's good. And communication, we have a Teams channel where we have uploaded the materials. We have this dedicated question channel where you can ask as many questions as you can. Of course, you can also answer to your peers. Yeah, I think the most you can take from this module if we make it interactive, if we discuss, if we see about issues. Who is working part-time? That's a little bit more than half. Okay. Who is doing some kind of automation? Okay, that's maybe one fifth. Okay, if you have any use cases, if you have any questions, if you have any input, well, I'm happy to discuss. So just jam in, ask your questions, and we can make this a little bit more interesting, more interactive, and more practical use cases. Always welcome. Yeah, if you read the Modulbeschreibung, you have seen that we would like you to have basic knowledge of computer networking, like MPLS, VRFs, BGP. Who has not passed CN2? You're at the same time in CN2. Okay, okay. I think that's no problem, because I will provide you all the configuration you need. It just helps you to understand what you are automating if you have the knowledge about these technologies. If I assume everyone here has passed or attended the automation with Python module in the first semester, so you have a basic Python knowledge. Git, hopefully you have used in other modules as well. And Linux basics, just we run our scripts normally on Linux or in Docker containers, so it helps if you have basic Linux know-how. If you have any lack of knowledge in this, it only means that you maybe need 1-2 hours more to investigate. It definitely helps if you have all this knowledge. If you don't have all the knowledge, you can find resources. I will also share some links with some information, and otherwise just send me a message. You would like to have some resources in this area, and then I can provide you with videos, blog posts, or what is needed. The tasks on the labs, they can look pretty simple in the beginning. So last year, I made a poll in the teams in the end, because yeah, I said in the beginning this task will take more time than you expect, and I would say don't underestimate the task. Many times if you do network automation, the devil is in the detail. It looks simple. You have maybe 80% pretty fast, but then there are some small details, and the vendors are really good to make our life miserable. Many times there are some workarounds we have to find, so don't try to do it last minute. Start earlier. Also, I would suggest go through the labs before, the ones who are not graded. They should prepare you for the work afterwards. It always happens that 5 days before the deadline, someone comes and says, my Ansible environment is not running. And then, of course, I will help. I will definitely help, but it will be challenging to finish in only 5 days if you start not earlier. Just as a reminder, I know you have other modules, you have other deadlines, but from my side of view, my deadlines are the most important ones. Yeah. This year, the first time, I have published all the slides and exercises on the GitLab. If you want, you can fix all my typos. You can create issues. Yeah, that's just here. I probably will change some stuff in the exercises because they are at the moment how it was last year. I will definitely add some stuff in the Ansible, for example. That was also from the Q feedback. And yeah, but you can see the Git commits, how I work, what time I publish changes. Yeah, and feel free to contribute in any way you want. So, for the basic module, for the exam, any questions? Yes. What is the question is if physical attendance is required. The answer is only for the exam. On the exam you have to be physical present, otherwise it's difficult. The rest, the labs, the lecture, it's you all adults, so up to you. I'm here. I will also reply on Teams. I think it can give you some guidance, some guidelines, but it's up to you. It's also not your first semester, so yeah, no requirement for physical presence. The labs itself, the graded one will be single work. Yeah, you can definitely discuss. I would appreciate if I don't get two exactly same submissions. Also, the submissions in the end will be just a git commit on the git push, of course. So you don't have to deliver anything special. It will be one repository or maybe two, and you have to push, and then I will take the code from there. You also don't have to write huge documents. The exam itself will be probably closed. Yeah. The exam will be not extremely difficult in my opinion. It's easy to say for me. On the student portal there is definitely one from 2 years ago. I can also see that I can upload the one from last year. Yeah, it's 1 hour. If it's open book, I have to make the exam more complex. I have to make it, yeah, somehow that I can test if you are good in Googling or if you know the topic. If it's closed, I can make it easy. I can ask some simple questions and we can have a good time in 1 hour. Otherwise, I would have to make the exam bigger. Any further questions? Okay, then let's go into the two topics, the two basic topics we will see all the time again. So, who has heard about YAML? Okay, that's almost everyone. That's an easy one then. So, YAML, it's now at the moment in version 1.2. We have at the moment the name YAML ain't a markup language. Funny story, we will see later. One issue with YAML is we have to know which version are we using. If we are doing Python, and in this module we're focusing on Python, we could also go with Golang, but because you have Python in the semester 1, we will also here focusing on Python. We have a bigger ecosystem, all the tools we see are implemented in Python. If we work with Python and YAML, there are two main libraries to work with YAML. One would be the PyYAML and the other one would be YAML. And one, PyYAML only works with YAML 1.1. The other one supports both. Default would take 1.2. So we have to keep in mind which spec we are using. I personally like YAML, but of course there are many things that are a little feeling weird sometimes. So YAML looks easy in the beginning, has some devil details we have to know about. We have some best practices we should comply to it, and then we should be fine. The goal, of course, in the exam and also in the exercise you will see, there are some easy questions like we have this JSON format, how would it look in YAML, and the other direction. We need to be able to write YAML files, read YAML files. Yeah. So, the first version of YAML, the name was Yet Another Markup Language. That was in 2001 in this release. But then there are 3 guys who developed YAML. They came to the conclusion it's not really a markup language. It's more a data serialization language. So they changed the name because they wanted to keep the acronym to YAML ain't markup language. And if you want to hear the story on link number 4, there are 2 of the 3 guys who developed answering the question why it is not a markup language. So yeah, just as a story beside. Sometimes you can read still the old name. I personally don't really care what YAML stands for. Important is that we know how YAML works. Markup languages, I'm sure you had a lot of them already. We have, of course, HTML, XML, and they are focusing on tags, defining elements, and markup how the document should look. And I'm not a big XML fan. For me, it's hard to read. So I like YAML. It's simple most of the time, well formatted. We have case sensitive, of course. And if you're coming from Python, you are used to the indent that has to be correct. So many people prefer JSON because we don't have the issue with indent. I personally like YAML because it forces me to structure it well, that I can read it, and has some nice features that JSON does not have. JSON, yeah, we all know JSON. Since version 1.2, JSON is a completely subset of YAML. So if we have a tool who supports YAML 1.2, we can parse JSON with it. So if you have a CLI tool, for example, working with YAML, you can also work with JSON because it's completely subset. One thing I have to say on the exam, if there is a task, convert this JSON to YAML, yes, it is correct. You can just use the same JSON, but that's not the task of the exam. Then it would be to convert it to the classical YAML syntax we know. So, we will now go through some details. If you have any questions. No. First, the syntax is completely different because we don't have the brackets, and we have much more features in YAML. There are some different JSON flavors who, for example, also support comments. but the original JSON does not support any comments or yeah. So we have some magic features in YAML we'll see where we definitely not have in JSON. So one thing would be sequence of scalars. Scalars is just another word for any values. So a value could be a string, an integer, a boolean. We will see all these types later. And we can have a list. If we want to have a list, we have two options. We can use the square bracket, or we can have with this dash. So simple. Then we have mapping from scalars to scalars. So we can have, in Python we would call them dictionaries. In YAML we call them mappings. We have the same two options again with the JSON-like syntax or the YAML-like syntax. And here we will see this will be an integer, this will be a string, so magically it will be converted. If we use the syntax down here in the JSON-like style, then we have to use the brackets for the string. And of course we can now have some combinations. We can have mapping of scalars to sequences, so we can also have a sequence in a map. There are different ways to write it, with spaces, without spaces. We could also have the indent directly here without two spaces. That would be also valid. There are different ways. In the end, I recommend for you to find a way how you want to form it and always do it the same way. That's easier for you to read. But all these three versions are exactly the same in the end. We can have the opposite. We can have sequences of mappings. Also here we can have the indent directly. That's normally how I like to do it, but we could also make it a little more verbose with an extra new line. Also works. And of course still the JSON-like syntax. Mappings of mappings, so we can have nested mappings. Same thing. I think we can go through all of them quite quickly, as you all know already YAML, and you will practice this in the exercise. We can have a list of lists. We can combine all these different ways. And now the first feature that JSON does not have are comments. With the hash, we can write comments. We can write comments on a new line, behind a scalar, or between a dictionary or a map. So I really like this feature because sometimes I want to make a comment, why did I put this setting here, for example? And if we put it here, the string will be from this G to this 1. This will be one string, and the comment is just a comment. Yeah. For me, it helps sometimes also for making some notes. That's just one of the nice features. We can also have multiple documents in one document. So normally we don't really need to indicate a new document with these 3 dashes and the 3 dots, the end of the document, but we could, and then we can have one big file with multiple documents. So if we pause, we will get multiple different YAML, how it's called, data structures. So we can loop over the document. Many times we see the 3 dashes in the beginning, also to indicate this will be a YAML document. If you work with Ansible, for example, you will see that sometimes you have multiple documents in one file. It's a feature. Some tools use them, some don't use them. Another nice feature, in my opinion, are anchors and aliases.
So what we can do is we can define an anchor here. In this case, we define an anchor called B for this scalar beer. And if we make a shopping list, we don't have to put all the time the same value. We can just reference to this value here. And if we read the YAML file with Python, for example, we get the values, not the reference. So the reference is solved when we parse the document and we get the actual value. The same works for more complicated data structure like dictionaries or maps. So here we have the host A defined with these two key value pairs, and in the next rule we can use this again. The only thing we have to be aware that we are not making some recursive loops. So there is a Wikipedia article, I think it's called YAML bomb, where you can crash your computer when you make a recursive loop. The same is actually possible in XML. Yes? The question was if it's possible to do this with kind of global parameters. The answer is always it depends. It depends how the data structure in the end is used. If we define something, I think it's even this next slide, no, this slide here, this is an example from Docker Compose. Docker Compose allows us to use special values with a x minus to indicate that this is not used in the final data structure. So here with x minus we can create some template. But in the end, if someone parses this file, he will have a variable called x napalm with a dictionary. So if the tool we are using allows us to define data structures we don't use in the end, then it is possible to have this kind of templates or global parameters. But if our tool does not allow this, yeah, so YAML itself does not have a feature to only use them for the parsing, and so if it's defined, it will be also after the parsing there. Does it make sense? The scope of the variable, it's everything is global. So you can also overwrite the variables or the anchors, would not recommend, but yeah, there is no kind of namespaces or something. Yeah. So yeah, here we can use anchors. It can be handy to not duplicate some stuff. For example, if we want to write access control lists or something. But on the other side, we also have to be careful that it's still readable. And I would not recommend to nest too much, because it can get complicated and hard to troubleshoot if something goes wrong. We can also merge. So instead of using it directly, we can merge. This allows us to define, for example, a service, and now here we merge these 4 key value pairs and we override the name. So we can merge, we can also multiple merge from 2 different parts, and then we can override some key value pairs. Can also be handy if we have, for example, definitions for Cisco devices, and we have definitions for Juniper devices, and then depending which device it is, we can merge these settings into this mapping. And as I mentioned, this is one of the examples where I used it. I had to define many Docker containers or services in Docker Compose for test minions, and I could just create a basic template in Docker Compose with this X- feature and use it here to create then maybe 10 minions with almost no lines of code. So many tools support them. Many tools have also some additional stuff. For example, if we then look at GitLab CI/CD, in this YAML there are special features with tags where we can reference to other jobs, but that's then implement specific for GitLab. But this feature here with anchors works for all the YAML files. Yes? That's a good point. The question is, why is this never referenced? And the thing is, this is a copy-paste error. Here, this napalm proxy should be here, napalm proxy. But if you copy it from a big file, so I made a mistake by copying the wrong. I will fix it and push it to the slides. There was also a question? Was the same question. Good spot, thank you very much. So, we have blocks, so strings. If we, it does not really look so nice here, but in a CLI it would look like NetAut, depending how far you are away, maybe it's easier to read. With this pipe, we can say everything that comes here with an intent is now a huge string. So with a pipe, we will preserve the new line. We have another style, the folder style, with this character, where the first line here will be one line, so this new line here will be removed. But because here is a more indented line, this will be kept. Can be complicated, we have to work with this to get used to it. Many times we have to also test it, so we have to be careful. Here we have a combination. The first text will be one line without new line. The other one will preserve the new lines if we want to store something like this in YAML. And not really used often, but would be possible from the spec, we can have only one Scholar in a file. If we don't have anything, just text for example here, then this is just a string. Or if we have a number, it would be just stored one number. Not really used often, but it would be possible to have this kind of file. So, let's go quickly through the different types. We have sequence, already seen, map, string, integer, float, boolean, set, null, and time date. Here we will have also some difference between version 1.1 and 1.2. Sequence, what we always can use is the explicit style to say this is a sequence. Does not really make a lot of sense because it will always be a sequence, but we can force it. In this sentence here does not really make sense, but yeah, we can do it. The same for mappings. Mappings are unordered, that's important to know. We have key value pairs, similar to strings, to dictionaries in Python. Strings, normally I would recommend to, if you're not sure if it's automatically a string, just put it in brackets. We could also use the explicit style with this tag. It's not used so much, but yeah. The same for integer. Here we have some special features. So for example, we can use underscore to make numbers more readable. They will be just ignored. Then what we can have is we can write hexadecimal. If we start with 0x, it will automatically be converted from hexadecimal. If we start with 0b binary, and now the fun part comes, if we start in version 1.1 with a 0, it will be treated as an octal. So this will be not the same number as we expect, most likely. So if you start with a 0 in version 1.1, this will be converted to decimal from octal. If you do it in 1.2, this will be a string. No, with a 0 it will be just an integer. But then you would need to have 0 and a small o in 1.2 to have octal. I would be really careful with this kind of magic features here. The same or even worse is the sexagesimal, base 60. Kind of handy if you have a timestamp in minutes and seconds and you want to have seconds. You can just write 13 double colon 20 and then it will convert into seconds as an integer. Only works in 1.1 and yeah, can have some really weird side effects if you're not aware of this feature. The same for floats, nothing special. Maybe the two numbers minus infinity or plus infinity, not a number, who also are float values. Boolean, it's another pain point in YAML. In version 1.1, the regex used to indicate a Boolean is huge. So, for example, if you write NO and you want to say, here I want to store my number, then it's not NO, it will be converted to false. And if you have the multiple times, it will be just overwritten by each of the false. That's the reason why all this value here had to be in brackets, because otherwise we only would have a map with true and false and the last value. In version 1.2, this is a little bit better. The regex is smaller, but I highly recommend only use true and false. If you use a YAML lint tool, it will also throw some errors if you use other words, because it's not best practice to use yes and no and on and off. So, for example, if you want to store the shortcuts of countries, Norwegian would be false. I can have some weird side effects. We can also use set. Here is the only time we explicitly need to say this is a set, because there is no other way to define a set. If we want to define a set and not a list, we can do that. Null, we have 5 different ways to define null. And time is also one thing we have to be aware. If we just put it like this, it will be converted to a data type. So if you want to keep the format as a string, you have to put it in brackets or explicit it with string. Yeah, here we have some examples. Nothing major. I like YAML, definitely, if you have all these small points in mind. I will also share a link to a blog post who makes a list of all these pain points. Any questions to YAML? Okay, so another library we will use a lot is Jinja templating. Many times if we want to generate some text, some configurations, or we want to render a web page, for example, we use templates. I assume everyone has used templates, so we can skip this part. In the end, we have a template, in this case, the famous song, Old MacDonald had a farm, and now we can just render this template with all the animals. So we need the template, we need the data structure to feed in, and we will get then the end result. And yeah, what would be the goal? We need to be able to read Jinja templates. We will do this a lot. Also to write it. Yeah. So here we have another example for extremely simple network configuration where we have a device and we have defined some data structure. We have a name, a domain name, syslog server, interfaces, that's probably a list. And we have then different interfaces. We have BGP with a autonomous system number. And with this data structure, we can now build this configuration. Here we can already see we iterate over this list. And in the end, we get the configuration. Oh, pretty simple. If we use YAML, this could be how a data structure looks. This is extremely simplified. Normally, of course, on the interface, we would maybe have more properties like IP address, description, but the slides do not allow me to put too much data there. So with this data structure and this template, if we render it, we will get this configuration. This configuration we could send to a device. So this is the classical legacy way. We will then see how we can also do this not in a classical configuration, but more in a structured way with yang in the end of the module. But this is still a way that we use a lot, also because we many times have to support legacy hardware. Many companies still have routers and switches who are maybe 20 years old, and they don't have the newest features, newest APIs, so many times we are forced to also support the legacy way. So now the question here would be, what are our requirements for a template language? What does a template language like Jinja2 need to have? For example, we already saw the for loop, so that would be something handy, right? What else do we need? If conditions, yes, we need conditions. We need to adapt on values we enter. Anything else? Can also be the extremely basic stuff. We need to have statements that we can put the value from a variable into the text, right? We need conditions, we need for loops. Anything else we would like to have? Comparisons? Yes. Substitutions would be handy. Anything else? I created a long time ago this graph trying to say what Jinja kind of has features. We have expressions where we can express variables, we can use filters with a pipe, and then we can do something with the value. We can also pipe it multiple times. We have literal, we have all the math stuff. We can multiply, we can divide, if it makes sense. We have comparison, we have logical to test stuff. If it's true, if it's false, we need that for the comparison. We have a lot of statements like for, if, we can set new variables. We have include and import, so we can also make the structure of our templates easier in dividing some parts in different files and then include them. And also really handy for organizing the templates, because if you have one huge template, it will be a mess. We have extend, so there is a feature that we can define the template with blocks and then we can override these blocks. We have macros where we can define kind of functions and call them. Yes? The question is, what is the difference between include and import? It's the difference is how it is cached and how the variables are handled in the namespace. Yeah, the details are in the documentation. I go quickly through the rest. I think 2 slides. We have Jinja web page where we can test this stuff. You can also use it in the exercise. And here we would use a filter. The whole Jinja part was quick and small, but we will use it a lot. You will need to read the documentation. I cannot give you all the details in just 20 minutes. So, but if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer. And in the end, we have to use it to get used to it. Any questions? Okay, thank you very much.